There are people who move through the world differently, not louder, not more confident, not necessarily more successful, but differently, in a way that's hard to name and even harder to ignore. You've probably felt it. Someone says something quiet, in a room full of noise, and it lands like a stone dropped into still water. Or someone creates something, a piece of writing, a solution, a single sentence, and you feel it before you understand it. These aren't accidents. They belong to 4 specific types of minds. And if you've ever been told you think too much, feel too deeply, or see things no one else seems to see, there's a good chance you're one of them. You're about to discover these 4 rare souls that don't just walk through life, they redefine it, often leaving everyone else scratching their heads and wondering, how do they do that? We're talking about the secret masterminds, the quiet visionaries, the intense dreamers, and the brilliant rebels who, despite their small numbers, leave an outsized impact on everything they touch. They challenge our assumptions, break the mold, and often, without even trying, utterly shock us with their unique way of being. Get ready, because what you're about to learn might just change how you see the people around you, and maybe even yourself. Let's start with the INFJ, often called the mystic. Imagine someone who combines the deep, swirling waters of idealism with the razor-sharp edge of decisive action. Sounds like something out of a legend, right? That's an INFJ. They make up less than 1% of the population, which is why encountering one can feel like finding a unicorn. Their rarity isn't just a number, it's a profound difference in how they experience and influence the world. What makes them so surprising? It's their intuition. It's not just a hunch, it's an almost psychic ability to sense underlying patterns, hidden meanings, and future possibilities that are invisible to most. They see the entire tapestry when others are still trying to understand a single thread. This isn't about woo-woo predictions, it's about an incredible capacity for empathy and pattern recognition that allows them to intuitively grasp the bigger picture, often long before anyone else. Think of Martin Luther King Jr. or Mother Teresa. These were individuals who didn't just see a problem, they envisioned a complete, ideal solution, and then, with unwavering conviction, moved mountains to make it real. Their idealism wasn't passive, it was a powerful engine for change. They don't just dream of a better world, they develop a precise, intricate blueprint for how to build it, brick by painstaking brick. But here's the kicker. INFJs are not just soft idealists. When they decide something is right, when their vision crystallizes, they possess an incredible, almost stubborn, determination to act. They can be incredibly organized, strategic, and persistent. This blend of deep empathy, intuition, and practical execution can be utterly baffling to those around them. People often struggle to reconcile their gentle, understanding demeanor with their fierce, unyielding will to enact their vision. They might be the quietest person in the room, yet their insights carry the most weight, often leading to profound shifts in thinking or direction. They inspire change, not by shouting, but by showing a path forward that resonates deep within others' souls. They might shock you with their deep understanding of your inner world, even if you've barely spoken. This ability to connect deeply, to truly see others, coupled with their visionary drive, is why they are often revered and sometimes misunderstood. They walk the line between the sacred and the practical, making the impossible seem achievable. If you're an INFJ, you already know the particular weight of seeing what others don't see, the loneliness of knowing how something will end before it begins. This video is, in part, for you. Next, we have the INTJ, affectionately known as the strategist. If the INFJ is a mystic, the INTJ is a master architect of reality. They are the chess grandmasters of life, always thinking several moves ahead, meticulously planning for every contingency. The INTJ sees the world as a system waiting to be optimized, and they have very little patience for the parts that resist improvement. About 2% of the population. And what leaves people in awe, and sometimes unnerved, is the precision. The INTJ doesn't just think, they construct. Every idea gets stress-tested. Every plan gets reverse-engineered from the outcome backward. Every inefficiency becomes a problem that quietly demands solving. What makes them rare isn't intelligence alone. It's the combination of long-range vision and ruthless practicality. They can see 10 moves ahead, and they're already annoyed that everyone else is still debating move 2. They don't need your approval. This is the thing people often mistake for coldness. But it isn't coldness. It's independence so complete it can feel almost alien in a world that runs on consensus and social validation. The INTJ simply doesn't experience the need for others to agree before they move. And when they arrive at a solution, when they cut through years of accumulated confusion with something so clean and obvious in retrospect that everyone wonders why no one thought of it sooner, that's the moment that leaves people speechless. Not because the INTJ is showing off, they're not. They genuinely don't understand why it took everyone else so long. If you're an INTJ, you know the specific frustration of watching systems fail that you could fix, if anyone would just get out of the way long enough to let you. Now let's turn our attention to the INFP, the dreamer. If INFJs are visionaries and INTJs are architects, then INFPs are the poets and artists of the soul. The INFP carries something inside them that most people stopped carrying a long time ago. The uncompromising belief that the world should be more beautiful, more honest, more true than it currently is. Also, a relatively rare type, around 4% of the population, INFPs move through the world guided by an intensely rich inner life, a deep well of empathy, and an unwavering commitment to their core values. And the thing that consistently surprises people about INFPs is the gap between how they appear and what they're capable of. They can seem quiet, dreamy, easily overlooked, but push against something they believe in, diminish something they love, dismiss something they've poured themselves into. And you will discover very quickly that beneath that gentle surface is a spine made of something close to steel. They don't compromise on what matters, not because they're stubborn, but because their values aren't preferences, their identity. To ask an INFP to betray what they believe is to ask them to stop being themselves, and they would rather lose everything than do that. This is what makes their creative work so arresting. When an INFP makes something, a story, a piece of art, an act of unexpected kindness, it doesn't just communicate, it transmits. You feel it in a place you can't quite locate, because they didn't make it to impress you. They made it because something inside them simply could not stay silent. The world tends to underestimate INFPs right up until the moment it can't anymore. If you're an INFP, you know the exhaustion of feeling everything this deeply in a world that keeps telling you to feel less. Finally, meet the INTP, the logician. If INTJs are the architects, INTPs are the pure theoretical scientists, the mad geniuses who revel in the abstract and the unconventional. Making up about 3 to 5% of the population, INTPs are defined by an insatiable intellectual curiosity. Their minds are like vast, intricate libraries, filled with an endless array of concepts, theories, and hypothetical scenarios, all waiting to be explored and dissected. What truly shocks people about INTPs is their almost playful, yet intensely rigorous approach to intellect. They don't just think, they dissect. They love to break down complex ideas into their fundamental components, examine them from every conceivable angle, and then put them back together in novel ways. This leads to an incredibly unconventional approach to problem solving. While an INTJ might focus on efficiency and implementation, an INTP is more concerned with the elegant purity of a theory or the fascinating intricacies of a system. They are often brilliant debaters, not for the sake of winning, but for the sheer joy of exploring different perspectives and challenging assumptions. They thrive in environments where they can freely explore ideas, unencumbered by practical constraints or social expectations. Think of brilliant scientists like Albert Einstein, or philosophical thinkers who challenged established norms. The shock factor for an INTP often comes from their ability to suddenly connect seemingly disparate ideas, leading to a profound insight that others completely missed. They can seem detached or lost in thought, but their minds are always buzzing, processing, and generating new hypotheses. Their love for debate isn't aggressive, it's an intellectual sparring match, a way to test the limits of logic and discover new truths. They can sometimes appear aloof or socially awkward because their primary focus is internal, on their intellectual landscape, rather than external social cues. However, when they find a topic that sparks their interest, their enthusiasm is infectious, and their explanations can be incredibly insightful, even if they sometimes get lost in the theoretical weeds. They might shock you by pointing out a flaw in a widely accepted belief, or by proposing a solution so out of the box it feels like magic. Their brilliance lies in their relentless pursuit of knowledge, their comfort with ambiguity, and their unique way of seeing the world as a giant puzzle waiting to be solved. They show us the power of pure, unadulterated thought, always pushing the boundaries of what we know. These four, the mystic, the architect, the idealist, the theorist, leave the world in awe, not because they try to. Most of them would prefer to be left alone, to do what they do. They unsettle people because they reflect something back, a different way of being. A reminder that depth is real, that vision is real, that the things most people have learned to suppress are actually someone else's greatest strength. The world needs people who see differently. It always has. The problem is that those people spend most of their lives being told something is wrong with them. Nothing is wrong with you. Which of these four resonates with you, or someone you love? Tell me in the comments. I read every one, and if you found yourself in any of these words, if something here felt less like information and more like recognition, subscribe. Because this is what we do here. Every week, we go deeper into the minds that the world doesn't quite know what to do with. You're in the right place. And if this touched something you want to go deeper with, there's a place for that. It's called The Hidden Chamber. The link is below. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video. Rare Soul.